Good morning, everybody. If you haven't already, please find a socially distant seat, and we'll get started. Well, good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Justin Aaronworth, and I'm the President and CEO of the Water Institute of the Gulf. We are pleased to host this socially distant event today, and thank you all for wearing masks. We would ask that you keep your masks on during this event and while you are here, and of course when you leave as well. I want to begin by acknowledging and thanking the governor for being here, who you'll hear from in a moment, as well as the Fema administrator, Pete Gaynor, who is here with us today. And I'll say a little bit about the role, important role that he plays in what we will announce today, and all that we are doing to make our communities safer and more resilient. So what this is all about today, and I think is appropriate given the pandemic that is so much on our mind and are facing. And what this building was built for, and what the Water Institute is all about, is about using science to inform decision making so that we are better prepared before a disaster hits. Our focus, of course, is on water, and that's what we'll talk a little bit about today. The agreement that we will sign shortly is a cooperative endeavor agreement between the Water Institute, the Port of New Orleans, and Louisiana Economic Development. And the idea is in some ways very straightforward. We are going to be putting technology in the hands of vessel pilots who are operating in and around the Port of New Orleans, who will be able to take the bathymetry data that they are collecting routinely and bring it back to a centralized place so that we will get a better picture of the movement of sediment, the movement of water in and around the port. That will allow us to help the Port of New Orleans in the first instance, but ports all up and down the Mississippi River will benefit from this, as well as ports beyond, to have a real-time picture of the sediment and the bottom of the river, but also ultimately to have predictive analytics so that the Port of New Orleans and then many other ports will be able to get ahead of their dredging needs, will be able to find efficiencies based on that knowledge, and will ultimately be able to save money from as well as time by having to spend less time waiting for a berth. There will also be important climate benefits to this because we'll be burning less fuel, so we'll see emissions reductions, which of course is quite important, and overall using that information to help ports and help us understand the river better. Because of course here in Louisiana we have a 50-year, $50 billion master plan that, among other things, requires and calls for diversions to help build back land. Well, this data can also help the leadership of the state's coastal program, Chip Klein, Bren Haas, and others, inform the operation of those diversions, as well as with the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, which the governor has been leading to ensure that we're in a we're better able to respond and deal with flood and inland flood events as they occur. So ultimately, what we believe this partnership will lead to is better information today for the port, better information on the river generally, and ultimately the creation of a smart port facility here on the water campus. Under Secretary Pearson's leadership, we are pursuing the creation of a smart port facility to help the Port of New Orleans as well as many others. And then ultimately, and this is what we were talking a bit with the administrator about, having a facility here on the water campus to help advise the governor, state agencies, as well as federal agencies from a hurricane and inland flooding prediction perspective. So that as these events happen, and unfortunately we know that here in Louisiana it's not a question of if there will be another major storm or another major hurricane, but when, and to ensure that we are in the best position possible. And FEMA, of course, has such an important role in helping this community and many others be prepared for that next storm. So with that, I'm really honored to call upon the governor to share some comments At the Water Institute, we are particularly grateful and appreciative to the governor for his strong support for ensuring that decisions are based on the best available science. And so, without further ado, the governor of Louisiana.
Thank you, Justin, and thank all of you for being here. The last time I was in this room, I think there were about 200 people right here. So obviously this is more evidence that we are in a new normal. And I thank all of you for coming out to the water campus today. And we appreciate all that the Water Institute in the Gulf is doing to advance science and science's intersection with protecting our people, growing our economy as well. We are extremely honored to have FEMA Administrator Peter Gaynor with us today. So, Administrator Gaynor, thank you so much for joining us here at the water campus and at other venues. I've already had an opportunity to meet with him at GOSEP this morning, where we talked about hurricane season. And you know, it's always a challenge to prepare for hurricane season. It is a double challenge this year because as we prepare for and potentially respond to and recover from a hurricane this year, we'll be doing so during the middle of a public health emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I do want to make sure, Administrator, that you know how thankful and appreciative we are in Louisiana for your personal help, the partnership we've enjoyed with FEMA, and especially with Regional Administrator Tony Robinson and the individuals that you all have sent here to work nonstop, those being Jerry Stoller and John Long. Louisiana is a safer place today because of the work that you all have done, and it runs the gamut from test materials and PPE and you name it, and your extensive emergency management experience and the activities we've had here in partnership with FEMA have just been tremendous. So I want to thank you for that. And we especially appreciate the fact that you are multitasking, and while you're responding to this pandemic, we are preparing to respond for a hurricane, which we pray, by the way, we don't get. But as we know, and I think it's already been said, it's a question of when and not if. If that doesn't happen this year, that'll be just fine. And I do want to remind everybody here and everybody who might be listening that when you take your precautions and you prepare for hurricane season this year, it is a little different than hurricane season in previous years. And so when we say update your game plan and go to getagameplan.org, we really, really mean it, because you will find references there to things that you need to think about and be prepared for you and your family that haven't been an issue before. That's why we've been practicing and preparing for a range of scenarios that we may experience here in Louisiana, working with all of the folks around the state of Louisiana, our neighboring states, with FEMA, with all of the regions, to make sure that we are as prepared as we can potentially be. That includes planning with local emergency officials for potential sheltering needs, nursing home support, placement of equipment such as pumps for specific needs, but also PPE and tents and things that we might need in congregate sheltering, and how do we shelter evacuees safely here in Louisiana in light of what's going on. We did have a pretty good dress rehearsal in Tropical Storm Cristobal. We also learned a lot in Tropical Storm Cristobal. And we know that we haven't hit the peak of hurricane season, which traditionally doesn't happen until the August-September timeframe. So you do have time to prepare if you haven't done that already. So I'm going to ask you again, go to getagameplan.org. Your preparations this time are going to include things like masks, facial coverings, hand sanitizer, along with the more traditional items. Now, speaking to preparedness, that really leads me to today's announcement and the reason for being here at the Water Institute in the Gulf. I am pleased to announce that we're creating a Smart Port initiative. This is a partnership of the Louisiana Department of Economic Development, the Port of New Orleans, and the Water Institute of the Gulf. And I want to thank Don at LED and Randy at the Port and Justin at TWIG, the Water Institute of the Gulf. Phase 1 of this Smart Ports initiative will see the Water Institute use funds from the Port of New Orleans to model sediment levels in the Mississippi River. Sensors are going to be installed on workboats and other vessels to detect sediment levels The Water Institute will collect and interpret that data and help the port, I should say, and the Corps of Engineers to determine future dredging needs for keeping the river at optimal performance levels. In the second phase of the Smart Port Initiative, the partners are going to create digital interface that unifies port operations at every supply chain level. And the digital picture will give real-time information to shippers, port tenants, port administration, regulatory agencies, and multimodal transportation partners, so that everybody's operations on the river will be safer, they're going to be more streamlined, and they're going to be more efficient. A digital copy of the Smart Port operations will reside at the water campus here and will be invaluable to helping us address emergency management during disruptions, threats, and storms, which is why we envision a third phase in which a hurricane and flood risk center will be established here on the water campus. Administrator Gaynor, we look forward to partnering with you all at FEMA as we develop this center to prepare for and respond to coastal and flooding events in Louisiana. Here in Louisiana, in terms of our agencies, it'll be GOSEP and the National Guard that will be key partners in the eventual Hurricane and Flood Risk Center. And the Water Institute's going to help us model coastal data to determine more precisely and hopefully as far in advance as possible the level of response that we're going to need to assemble in response to any particular storm or emergency. The data we collect and analyze through these efforts will make our ports smarter and more efficient, but also they're going to make our people safer and our businesses and industries more productive. And to talk more about the economic development potential of this project, I'm going to introduce the Secretary of Louisiana Economic Development, Don Pearson.
Justin and the Governor have helped outline and show you the basic framework that we're talking about here today. You know Louisiana as an energy state. You know Louisiana as an agriculture state, a state of advanced manufacturing, a state of forestry. But the common denominator here is around our highways, our rails, and our more than 30 ports. It's around the logistics that drive the state that today we announced this important new framework that allows a vision to proceed. One of the leadership charges that the Governor has given to the Cabinet is that we don't work in silos, we work collaboratively. And today that's exhibited by working closely with the Water Institute of the Gulf and our great partner, the Port of New Orleans, and bringing forward this effort that takes the available science and information that's with the Water Institute of the Gulf, that's been collected, and can now direct it in a way that can even be more beneficial. Creating a model that we know, once we get the software in place and the communication systems in place, can be expanded for the Mississippi River Navigation Channel all the way through its journey in Louisiana. So science will allow us to drive and protect commerce on the river. And in so doing, we build a more prepared and more resilient Louisiana. So thanks for coming out today and being a part of this program. And I will defer now to Port of New Orleans President Brandy Christian.
Thank you, Secretary Pearson. Good afternoon. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today representing the Port of New Orleans. We appreciate this partnership with Governor Edwards, the Louisiana Economic Development, and the Water Institute of the Gulf. We actually began discussing this concept 2 years ago, so we're very excited to see this come to fruition. As mentioned, the Smart Port Initiative represents an important and concrete investment in Louisiana's future, and as Justin mentioned, the scientific data we collect will be invaluable in helping understand a rather dynamic river, the Mississippi River. But that alone is a worthy investment. But yet there's a very significant practical commercial value to this project. The Mississippi River, as you know, is a critical economic artery. Yet, unlike a static highway, the water levels fluctuate. And depending on the season and the river behavior, Siltration issues can significantly hinder our ability to serve vessels. Unplanned dredging is costly, and vessel emissions due to weather, water level, or air draft reasons can become commercially damaging across the entire supply chain, as Secretary Pearson mentioned. That's where the Smart Port project can make a big difference. Access to accurate and timely data, and ultimately the ability to predict the river's activity, will allow us to dredge appropriately and efficiently. It will also give our ocean carriers the confidence to navigate the river, moving freight and passengers through our gateway in a safe and timely manner. Now, as Louisiana's international container port, Port of New Orleans is proud to participate in this project. But as mentioned, as we expand this in all phases, this will benefit all vessels and all ports operating in the river. Because as you know, the maritime activity on the Mississippi River contributes to the state and the national economy by moving international commerce. So I'd like to thank LED and the Water Institute for your partnership, and we look forward to signing this agreement. Thank you. I'll turn it back to Justin.
Thank you very much. I'll now call Secretary Pearson, the governor, up. We'll sign the document, and then the governor and administrator will be available for questions.
So Justin, it's time to take some questions. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Administrator, you want to come up and... Sam Carlin.
I have a question for the administrator. I'm wondering if you can tell us more specifically what you're advising state and local governments to do to prepare for hurricane season with the coronavirus. Will they be different from your average hurricane preparedness?
Yeah, so it is going to be a different season this season with hurricane season and COVID. We are experiencing a resurgence of COVID-19 in the Sun Belt, and we want to make sure that everyone understands that you're going to need more time to do these critical items like evacuations, sheltering, screening of potential evacuees into shelters. It's just going to take more time. You're going to have to be better prepared as an individual. If you have to evacuate your home, your business, and you've got to go to a shelter, you're going to need to be prepared to have all those things that you have today: mask, hand sanitizer, all those things that we are living with now. Back in back in May, FEMA put out a guide to COVID preparedness during hurricane season. That guide's available online. It has everything you would need to consider hurricane operations and COVID at the same time. It's a great resource, so if you're an emergency manager out there, or you're just an individual, just, hey, am I doing enough? You can go on the FEMA website and download that. and be better prepared. And as always, listen to your local and state officials for exact guidance as it applies to you, no matter where you live in Louisiana.
Any other questions?
Yes, Governor. If there's an evacuation and people have symptoms or exposure, what would they be moved to special place, and will FEMA be funding it?
Well, first of all, we asked FEMA to fund everything. So we will certainly be making that request. And by the way, they've been tremendous partners, and I say that in jest. But what the administrator just said is exactly right. We will be at that time, if it's necessary for anybody to evacuate, or if we're going to open shelters that people can come to, whether or not they've been told to evacuate, we will make sure that people have the guidance that they need right then. And so, listening to local officials and state officials at the time the emergency is declared and so forth, because quite frankly, it's impossible to know today what the circumstances are going to be in the future when a storm might hit, as to exactly what that's going to look like. But I can tell you we have contingencies that spread across a range of possible situations that we might encounter. And so we're just going to need people to understand that the guidance is going to be a little more detailed this time. You know, for example, we may want to focus a little less on congregate sheltering, where we're taking people and putting them in the mass shelter facilities and doing more hotel rooms. But that's going to depend upon the availability of hotel rooms and where they're going to be and so forth. So the best I can tell people right now is it's going to be different. We're going to tell you at the time what it is that you need to do, but it's not possible for us to tell you that right now. But because of the additional, first of all, we already have declared emergency, public health emergency by the federal government on COVID-19. If we have a hurricane, I would anticipate we would have another declared emergency. And so we will be working with FEMA for every part of that, including the funding of it through the Stafford Act.
Also, local parishes may evacuate sooner than other parishes. Has the state set any new guidelines on when they should be evacuating, sooner?
Well, the timeline has been moved up. So the tabletop exercises that we've done, the work we've done with the regional partners, and quite frankly, some lessons we learned during Tropical Storm Cristobal, where we had a combination of mandatory evacuations in low-lying areas outside of protection systems, and then some recommended evacuations, voluntary evacuations in other areas. We actually learned some lessons. And so what I can tell you is decisions are going to be made further in advance, because anytime you have to deal with COVID-19 and take additional precautions, you need more time in order to actually execute the plan. And so I can only tell you right now, we will be making those decisions further in advance of landfall of the storm than we otherwise would. Sam.
Governor, your mask mandate went into effect today.
And thank you very much for complying with it.
You're welcome. Livingston Parish said they, to the extent they're enforcing it, they're not going to. There's also 3 parishes that are able to opt out. Can you comment on the Livingston Parish, just kind of the response you're getting? And also, are those 3 parishes opting out? Have you heard one way or the other yet?
I have not heard one way or the other on the 3 parishes that don't rise to the high incidence rate as defined by CDC, which is 100 cases per 100,000 people over a 2-week period. So I haven't heard yet they have that opportunity to do that. And as you know, within about 14 days, we will update that again based on the newest 14-day period. Those 3 parishes may or may not be in the same category, and there may be other parishes that actually change. With respect to Livingston Parish, look, as I told the state on Saturday, I believe it was, we need you to do what's right. What's right is wearing the mask. And we need that from leaders at all levels. We need it from business leaders, faith leaders, political leaders. And obviously there is a mandate now, because, quite frankly, we weren't getting the compliance that we needed before. And we are doing everything we can to not have to go back to phase 1 or phase 0. And this is, in the grand scheme of things, a very minor adjustment that people have to make in order to stay safe and leave more of our economy open, especially as we plan and prepare to resume schools and higher education in about a month. So it's the right thing to do. It's pretty obvious. It's pretty simple. And so we need people to comply. Anything else? By the way, since you're here, I'll give you the numbers. I just got them for today. 1,710 new COVID cases. That's a grand total of 79,827 since the inception of the public health emergency. The 1,710 new cases are on 18,431 new tests. We have done 953,000 tests overall, and in the month of July, 304,915 tests. The hospitalizations are up by 5% today. 1,308 COVID patients admitted, and 142 of those are on ventilators. And it looks like I just got a new text message that said that they're adjusting those numbers. So I might have to get back literally as I was reading them out. So I'll try to make sure that you have the best numbers possible here very shortly.
Have you noticed more people wearing masks today?
I have, but of course, I've been at GOSEP and I've been here. So I know that people at GOSEP and here are complying. I would expect that we're going to see, look, it's not just the mandate that you need to watch. Watch the example set by the president on Saturday when he visited the hospital. See what's coming out of the CDC and the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Look at the numbers for yourself and see the resurgence of this virus here in Louisiana and elsewhere. I mean, it's even without the mandate, we should have seen compliance going up and improving. And certainly with the mandate, we would expect to see that. Yes, sir.
This time tomorrow, of course, Vice President Pence will be here in Baton Rouge, just right down the street. Your general thoughts on that visit and what we're looking forward to?
Well, first of all, we've had tremendous communications with the Vice President and other members of the White House Coronavirus Task Force since the beginning, particularly Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, Administrator Gaynor, Dr. Gerard, who is Louisiana native, by the way, and many others. And so having him here in Louisiana to do some more face-to-face coordination, go over what the latest situation is, what some of the challenges are that we're asking for assistance. And then I believe it's fair to say that the focus in the afternoon will be on resumption of higher education here in Louisiana. But obviously this is going to be a venue where they talk about that as it relates to the country as a whole. So I'm excited about having him here and being able to interact with him and continue to this federal-state partnership that we've had. I just talked about the number of tests we've administered in the month of July already. Our goal is 200,000 tests per month, and that's a minimal goal. But we're so far ahead of that already through the first 13 days. That's been possible because of the partnership. And this is just one example of the partnership with the federal government in terms of testing supplies, swabs, and viral transport meeting and so forth. And by the way, we have until the 18th of July test sites here that are federally sponsored where we're trying to surge our baseline testing by an additional 5,000 tests per day. And I want to encourage everyone to take advantage of that. We have 4 fixed sites, Cortana Mall, Alex Bach Stadium on LSU, the Clark Activity Center on Southern, and we have Lamar Dixon Center in Ascension Parish. We also have testing at the Heathen Place Church, and then we're going to have more mobile testing. But you can get tested because you're symptomatic, because you've been in contact with someone who has COVID-19, or just because you think you want to know whether you've got it. And so we need people to take advantage of this because it's going to run through the 18th of July, and it's right here in the Baton Rouge area. This is another example of the partnership that we've enjoyed with the federal government because they only picked 3 metropolitan areas in the country: McAllen, Texas; Jacksonville, Florida; and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so quite frankly, we haven't gotten to 5,000 on any of the days that we've been operating, and so we want more people to take advantage of this opportunity. One more question. Yes, sir.
So we've already heard from Livingston Parish that they won't be enforcing mask mandates. Have you heard from other municipalities, other jurisdictions about their plans to enforce or not enforcing mask mandates?
No.
And will enforcement at the state level fall entirely on the state fire marshal's office, or will other law enforcement agencies be involved?
Well, primarily on the fire marshal's office, but we have other law enforcement agencies out there, for example, the state police, but we also have the Office of Public Health within the Louisiana Department of Health that goes out and looks at restaurants and so forth in bars, because, you know, we didn't close bars, we just limited them to having no on-premises consumption. And so they'll still be open, and some of them are still regulated by the Office of Public Health as well. So all of those agencies will be out and about.
Can the Office of Public Health issue some of the citations and penalties that we've heard about?
For those entities that they regulate, if they're not conducting themselves in accordance with the proclamation that we issued on Saturday, absolutely. But thank you all for coming out today. Justin, thank you so much for hosting us here again at this beautiful facility. I'm amazed every time I'm here. It never gets old. And I'm happy that we're not looking out at the water as high as we are, which is the way it's been most recently when I've been here. But thank you so much, and God bless you.